Hi everyone, I'm Josh Wright, and welcome to a new video series focused on learning the new hymns for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As many of you know, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is coming out with a new hymn book, and they are dripping out new hymns in intervals. And I was recently asked by a leader of the church to make videos on these new hymns. If it is a hymn in 4-part harmony, I will be going through each voice individually so you can learn your parts for Sunday worship. If it is a hymn with just a single melody line, I'll be going through that individually, and then I'll play the accompaniment part. My day job is being a concert pianist and piano teacher and online music educator. I make videos for a living of tutorials like this. So in many ways, it's a good fit. And in many ways, it's a horrible fit because I'm a terrible singer. So you'll have to bear with me. I'm not going to be singing much in these tutorials, but I just want to give a little bit of background, mostly just read the scriptures that each of the hymns are referencing right under the title. You can see that. And when appropriate, share a little bit of background. Today's tutorial will be focusing on This is the Christ, a hymn written in 1995 with the text by James E. Faust and Jan Underwood Pinborough, and music by Michael Finlinson Moody. With this being the very first hymn that we are covering, I thought I would go ahead and read one of my favorite writings about Jesus Christ. This comes from a talk by Jeffrey R. Holland in the October 1999 General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This talk is entitled, "And High Priest of Good Things to Come," and I'll read about 2 paragraphs from the talk that sums up how much love the Savior has for each of us and what he did for us, and I hope this can be diffused throughout this entire New Hymns video series, that everything is focused on Christ. Quote, "No one's eyes were more penetrating than his, and much of what he saw pierced his heart. Surely his ears heard every cry of distress, every sound of want and despair. To a degree far more than we will ever understand, he was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Indeed, to the layman in the streets of Judea, Christ's career must have seemed a failure, a tragedy. A good man, totally overwhelmed by the evils surrounding him and the misdeeds of others, he was misunderstood or misrepresented, even hated from the beginning. No matter what he said or did, his statements were twisted, his actions suspected, his motives impugned. In the entire history of the world, no one has ever loved so purely or served so selflessly and been treated so diabolically for his effort. Yet nothing could break his faith in his Father's plan or his Father's promises. Even in those darkest hours at Gethsemane and Calvary, he pressed on, continuing to trust in the very God whom he momentarily feared had forsaken him. Because Christ's eyes were unfailingly fixed on the future, he could endure all that was required of him, suffer as no man could suffer, except it be unto death, as King Benjamin said. Look upon the wreckage of individual lives and the promises of ancient Israel lying in ruins around him, and still say, then and now, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. How could he do this? How could he believe it? Because he knows that for the faithful, things will be made right soon enough." All right. So the scriptures associated with this hymn that are written right underneath it are 3 Nephi 11, 3 through 17. Because I gave such a long intro, I'm not going to read that one, but I will read the second one because it's just a few verses. This is Luke 22, 41 through 44. "And he was withdrawn from them about a stone's cast, and kneeled down and prayed, saying, Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. And there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling to the ground." Now we will switch to an overhead camera of just the keys, in case you are a pianist learning this and need some help with what finger numbers to use on which keys. And then I will put the lyrics and the sheet music up in 2 different portions of the screen so that you can follow along however you wish, and we will be going through the rest of the tutorial in that camera angle. All right, just a few housekeeping items in case you are not a musician and you are wanting to learn some basics of music while you learn these hymns. The boxes with a bunch of lines in them, that's called a staff. You'll notice that there are bigger boxes. So there's two staffs and they're connected by a line. It's two staffs or staves connected by a line. That's called a grand staff. Up top, you see this swirly mark. That's called treble clef. In the bottom, you see kind of a semicircle. That's called bass clef. Generally, treble clef is where sopranos and altos will sing, and in the bass, it will be tenors, baritones, and basses. Next to that, you will see three lowercase b's. Those are called flats. Basically, a flat in music, if you see a B, you go down a half step to make it flat. So we see a B flat, E flat, and A flat. You don't really need to know that, but you do need to know 3/4. What does that mean? That means 3 beats per measure, and the bottom 4 is a quarter note gets 1 beat. So that's critically important when you're learning music, to kind of know the meter. That's what it's commonly referred to as. So they heard a voice so mild. Those are 3 big beats per measure. 3, that's a little slice of a measure. That's called an upbeat or a partial measure. So this is the downbeat of the first full measure. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. You can hear that overall beat, even if you don't know all of these note values. If you'd like to know the note values really, really quick, let's go through them. The single notes with a little flag on them, that's an eighth note. Similarly, eighth notes are notes that have the bar connecting them. Okay, a quarter note is just a black note with a stem, no flag on it. That gets 1 beat. The eighth notes get half a beat. The quarter notes get 1 beat. If you see a quarter note, the black dot with a stem and a dot next to it, that's a dotted quarter note. That gets 1.5 beats. A dot adds half the value of whatever note, whatever the note is that it's attached to. So if the quarter note gets 1 beat, the dot adds half a beat. So it gets 1.5 beats. Very useful when we have so many eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and. As musicians, we will often count 1 and 2 and 3 and to denote half beats. So 1 half, 2 half, 3 half. We say 1 and it's usually marked with a plus sign. The and is. Not that you need to know that, but in case you're interested. And then finally, 2 other note values that you'll need for this piece. The white dots with a stem, those are called half notes. Those get 2 beats. And then finally, a white dot with a stem and a dot next to it. Remember, the dot adds half the value of the note. So since we have 2 beats for the half note, the white dot with a stem, that's 2 beats, the dot would add 1 extra beat because half of 2 is 1. Didn't know you'd be getting math in a hymn tutorial. From the beginning, I regrettably am going to have to sing this just so you know the melody. So I'll sing softly, even though the mic is right next to my mouth. Here goes. They heard a voice so mild, it pierced them through and made their souls to quake. They saw him come, a man in white. And right there is a little dot with a half circle over it. That sometimes people call it a bird's eye. It's an easy way to remember it. It's called a fermata in Italian. That means stop. So if you're riding the Italian metro and it says prossima fermata, I hope I'm saying that right, it will say the next stop. So fermata means stop. That's a place where you can take a breath. So white breath. The Savior who had suffered for their sake. They felt the wounds in hands and side, and each could testify. Now stop for 1 second. You'll notice 4/4. What in the world? We just changed meter. So 4/4 means 4 beats per measure, and the bottom 4 still means a quarter note gets 1 beat. It's basically a fraction. 1/4 quarter. That means the type of note that gets one beat. So quarter note gets one beat. So let's go from and each could testify. And each could testify, this is the Christ. So that's incredibly important to know that the meter changed and to count. 1, 2, 3. This is the Christ. What a lot of people might do is they might be in this comfortable 3/4 side, and each could testify, this is the Christ. This is, and come in way early on those. So we need to make sure we hold them full value. Okay, and each could testify on page 1. And each could testify, this is the Christ. 2, 3. This is the Christ, the Holy Son of God, our Savior, Lord, Redeemer of mankind. 2, 3. Another little music theory term that you need to know, that curved line is called a slur. So on Redeemer, on the deem of Redeemer, you're going to notice there's a half note there. And then there's a slur, that long line, going to another F. If it's the same note, if the slur connects an F to an F, the same F on the same staff placement, that is what we call a tie. You basically just hold that note. And it's pretty obvious from looking at the sheet music, but you don't breathe right there. You don't go, Lord, Redeemer of mankind. We don't want to do that. We, Redeemer of mankind. Since that's the end of a sentence, even though it's a tie, we can take a little breath. This is the Christ, the healer of our souls. 2, 3. Who ransomed us with love divine. 2, 3. I read his. Okay, now let's talk quickly about that little bracket with a 1 inside of it. That's what we call an ending. Think of it as a freeway exit. We have the first ending and we have the second ending. All right, so the first time through, we're going to take the first ending, obviously. Then, at the end of that bracket, right below that bracket, you see 2 lines and then 2 dots next to them. That is a repeat sign. Where have we seen that before? You may have missed it, but on the first page, they heard his voice. Right there on voice, just to the left of it, there's another repeat sign. We see the 2 bars and then the 2 dots. Repeat signs are like magnets. When you reach one end of the magnet, you go back to the other repeat sign. You don't go before the repeat sign or after the repeat sign or anything. You just go back to that. Again, that's fairly obvious when you're looking at the sheet music, but it's important to know this music theory so that you don't get lost when you're following along with the music if you're practicing on your own. Okay, so I read his words. We're going to go back to page 1 there. And they even give you a little courtesy. It might be confusing. You might say, Josh, what are you talking about? It says I read his words. Don't we just go back to the very beginning? Well, if you look at the end of the first ending, I read his, that's where it stops, and then we go back to the repeat, words. Okay, so that's how that works. And the second time through, we will take the second ending. We'll get to that in just a moment. So let's go from I read his words. I read his words, the words he prayed, while bearing sorrow in Gethsemane. I feel his love, the price he paid. How many drops of blood were spilled for me? With saints of old, in joyful cry, I too can testify, this is the Christ. 3. This is the Christ. 2. The Holy Son of God. 2. Our Savior, Lord, redeemed. 2. 3. Myrrh of mankind. 2. 3. This is the Christ. 2. The healer of our souls. 2. 3. Who, okay, right there, we're going to jump to the second ending. Ransomed us, sorry for my terrible pitch there, with love divine. All right, and then the piano does this little outro. You don't sing this. All right. I get to go back to my comfort zone and just play while you guys sing. So here goes. Actually, let me count you off. So it's going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, or 1 and 2. They heard his voice. All right, here we go. 1 and 2. Take a breath. Ready. Take the second ending. I hope you all have enjoyed this tutorial. I just wanted to make a quick note to pianists in case you're playing this. Feel free, especially in a single melody line piece, to spice up the arrangement. Basically, you can look at the chords above. They heard a voice. You see E flat. So in the key of E flat, or in the chord of E flat, we have E flat, G, B flat. And then you can extend this if you wanted to do like 7ths and 9ths and 11ths. You don't even need to get fancy. You could even just play an arpeggio, spread out E flat, B flat, G. Or you could go up to the A flat, sense that it's going. Something like. These are kind of cheesy little things I'm doing. But especially if you are accompanying a vocalist, you can do all sorts of things like that. Just extending the harmony, not just being constrained to what's on the page, but look at those chords and then fill it out a little bit more. A common thing you can do is if you see E flat, G, B flat, you can go E flat, B flat, G. So you can create a 10th with a 5th in the middle. That always sounds really nice. Even if you can't reach it, you can roll it. Right there, you could do that if you want. Right there, I did a 5th plus I put the 10th with the 5th in the middle. A second note is if you are singing with a good singer that doesn't need you to play every single melody note with them to follow along, you can depart from that. So doing this off the cuff, so hopefully this isn't terrible. I'll always give them those notes. Okay, so you don't have to go da 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 da. You could do. So let me see if I can somewhat sing this. They heard his voice. A voice. So I don't have to play da-dum. A voice so mild. Even though I'm playing B flat, the singer could be singing the E flat. And then it pierced them. I could do it pierced them. You can create interesting harmonies that way by going a little bit off book, mostly looking at those chord symbols, and then using the music as a general guide of where you want to be, what register you want to play in. Register means how high or how low you are on the piano. So hopefully that gives you a few ideas if you are accompanying. I wanted to just throw that in at the end here. If any of you have any questions, my email is josh@joshwrightpiano.com. Thanks so much for joining me today. Have a great week and good luck with learning these new hymns.